oh, so we're gonna have less chapters to play, and use like, oh no, the maths works out, and I was thinking that's a bit sus,
Yeah.
but I'll play it anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. I'm your host Liam. I'm joined as always by Jack.
How's it going?
And this is part 7 of the Detroit Become Human experience. Now, so essentially Jack has finished his penultimate chapter. First time playing it, it's his blind playthrough. So before we left, Jack thought he had killed Connor at the Stratford Tower. So yeah, Jack's probably got some chills here as we speak. But we start off with Kara in the chapter Midnight Train. So this is the one where you go over to Rose and Adam, hoping that you've not gone and met another Zlatko. This is one of Luther's recommendations. So yeah, Jack, just simply talk us through this chapter.
Yeah, of course. So you arrive at Rose's house, and it's her and her son Adam, and of course you ask for help, and you'd be forgiven for being a little bit wary about these characters given the hospitality that Todd and Zlatko gave you when you rocked up at their gaff.
Roll! Roll! Roll!
Again, she seems to be a source of help, and she tells Kara about that it's dangerous, but the way to get across is up the frozen river or something to get to the border or to get to Canada. And yeah, you have like a couple of down moments where you can just sort of explore the house. You can go upstairs and like go to tuck Alice in, but then you ultimately end up in like a room downstairs where you're seeing, I assume I think it was an android holding another android. Am I right in saying that, or is the android holding a human?
I think Android holding an android, because I think they said they shut down.
Right, okay, yeah. So there's like a choice there. I'm not sure if it really matters, but I'll let Alice see it. But I suppose the main source of tension in this scene is, of course, when you notice that the police are arriving, and there's this segment. And I've got to admit, like, they've done this a few times in this game now, but I really do feel under pressure when you see a ticking clock. And there was a couple of things in the room, because you have to like hide some deviant evidence. There was a couple of things that I found. One being obviously the room with the deviants in, so all you had to do was shut the door. And then there was like a jacket on the sideboard, and I just didn't know where the other bit was. And it turns out I think it was like the cupboard under the stairs, but I hadn't actually got that one until the policeman arrived. So I found 2 out of 3 bits of evidence, and I let the police in. I said, yeah, everything's fine. And I had a sort of a mad frantic search around the front room to close that final door under the stairs. But yeah, you're basically trying to not raise suspicion, of course, because they are looking for deviants after everything's blown up with, the Marcus storyline. It seems apparent that the machines are not trusted at this point. And I come through it pretty unscathed. I kept my eye on him at all times. And there was a rumbling from upstairs, and I was just, that's my daughter. And then I think as he was about to leave, there was another rumbling coming from the room where the deviants were in. And I just said, that's just the washing machine. And he bought it and left. So I know that scene can play out differently, so I don't know if you wanted to go into that, mate, or tell us about what happened for you.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting because you're going around this room and it relies on you to, sort of see the evidence before knowing a policeman gets there. So I think, you found 2, because you remembered there was a jacket there earlier that you could examine, but there was that random cupboard, and when the policeman was in the building, I was like, you screwed it. But turns out you can still clean the evidence up when the policeman's in the house with you, so you kind of discreetly shut the door, and I thought that was an interesting touch, kind of like a Last Chance Saloon thing. Yeah, this whole scene was really reminiscent of Fahrenheit to me. Fahrenheit has a lot of these moments where, for example, there's one scene where a cop knocks at the door and you have to clean, your bloody clothes and kind of, hide the evidence, maybe wrap your wrists up that have these, like, scars on them and bandage them while the police is knocking, and then you've got to kind of have dialogue with him to kind of, reduce his suspicions, and, yeah, very reminiscent. The only other thing I have to really mention is that I think the policeman, I could be wrong in thinking this, so do correct me if I am, but the policeman was the same model as the one in Beyond Two Souls, of a policeman that, talks to, the main character in that game. So I have a feeling it might just be a Quantic Dream Easter egg that all police officers look the same, or at least maybe it's like the same family and this one moved to Detroit and this is in the future. Who knows? But yeah, I just thought that was a little cool detail. But yeah, strong scene, and it really does like Kara's story is kind of coming to a close, where hopefully she can get across the border to Canada. Ends with Rose saying, "We leave tonight." So yeah, it's the last we see of her in this full part anyway, so hopefully the next time we see Kara, everything goes well. We move on back to Marcus, which will be the first of his 2 chapters in this series, where you're going over to Capital Park to, sort of free a bunch of androids from, a Cyberlife store and then to send a message. In the last episode I mentioned the kind of dynamic difference between North and Josh, and they're kind of having a little scuffle at the start of this episode, aren't they? I mean, at this point, were you kind of maybe siding towards one or the other? Were you trying to sit on the fence?
You know what? I haven't been, and I don't know, this may be harsh on mine, but of course there's like a main band of like 4 or 5, isn't there, for Jericho? Josh, Simon, North, and obviously Marcus. And they feel a little bit two-dimensional for me. Like, I don't really, because it's quite obvious that Josh is like the pacifist and North is like the one that sort of screams, for violence and for justice for the humans and stuff. I don't know, like, it was not actually until later on that you could start to really explore one of those characters in a little bit more detail. So at this particular point, I was just thinking like they're fairly two-dimensional, and I wasn't bothered too much by the fact that North and Marcus didn't see eye to eye. So of course, yeah, and I think as well the fact that opinions can swing so quickly, like it will come up saying that the downward red arrow for North, but I'm thinking to myself, if I get this mission right, I know that opinion's going to swing, and like for the opinion of Jericho as a whole. So it wasn't on my mind too much. But of course, obviously, in this scene, you've got like these little mini games, haven't you? You've got to interrupt the alarm system, and by doing so, you can like convert these workers, so you can sort of like sort out the piping underground. You can find a truck, you can block the road. Ultimately, like, it's geared towards the objective to like ram this truck through a window, so you can start to convert these androids and start to like amass an army, I suppose.
I want to say, actually, you uncover this scene that I never knew existed. There's a point where when you're destroying the wires to, overcome the security system, there's a part where one of the flying drones comes, and you can either hide, or there's a variety of options. I've always hid, and I've only ever seen other people hide. This is the first time I've seen someone run out, and obviously it caught you, and North luckily saves you, but has a little go at you, doesn't she?
Mm.
And then because the drone alerted people in time, I guess, you had to come up with something to do, while a police car goes by. I think that's what happened anyway. And you chose to make out with North in the bus stop. I had no idea you could do this, actually. It was quite an interesting scene, though. It was very much like a Brooklyn Nine-Nine moment.
Yeah, no, because I think the alternative was to, like, I think it came up saying abandon Jericho or like abandon North, and I was like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. And it said like act natural, and I was slightly hesitant because I was thinking, are they going to see right through it? But no, like, it seemed to work. But no, that's pretty cool that you didn't get that in your playthrough, like you haven't seen it before.
Yeah, it seemed to work. Almost North wasn't happy about it, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it was probably good that you went and did that and recovered that one, which was cool. But yeah, and then it leads to this really cool scene, doesn't it? Where, you drive the truck through the window and you're just building an army at this point. You're freeing all the people. It's pretty powerful how North sort of sees them and sort of says, oh yeah, they see us as merchandise. And then you're there freeing them and building the army. It's a pretty cool scene, isn't it? Another one of Marcus's speeches that we're constantly getting.
Yeah, that's right. He does one of his speeches, and following after that, I think the main objective is something to do with like leaving a message for like humanity. And you could sort of take a certain approach to it, whether you wanted to be more pacifist or whether you wanted to be like an aggressor. And don't get me wrong, I feel like being the aggressor would be more fun. But I was like, in this instance, I was like, no, I'll be more pacifist. I didn't want public opinion to necessarily go down further. And so I just started tagging and graffitiing the chosen symbol everywhere. I think like I pushed a couple of cars out the way. I think I converted more androids, and there was a pretty cool segment where you can like climb up the wall and you can like create this almost projection of like the symbol, but in like sort of in like a massive way in the middle of the street. And yeah, I suppose it all comes to this point where like the police start to turn up and your gang sort of like caught up in this fight. But you don't seem to be in it as much because they've all run away, haven't they? But yeah, like you ultimately find this group huddled around a couple of police officers, and in their trail you can see like these dead bodies that they've obviously killed, and it come up with a choice again whether I wanted to kill the officers or spare them, and I did choose to spare them on this occasion. I thought I'd gone all that way saying that violence won't help with other violence, so I was like, you know what, I'll spare them. You know what, I was expecting the opinion of Jericho to then go down there, but I don't recall seeing that on screen. So clearly they see Marcus as a leader, and they'll take his opinion regardless.
Yeah, it just really affects the news broadcast afterwards. For example, you had our two people were shaken, or whatever, but it could be two people were murdered. But yeah, no, I think we had a pretty identical playthrough, other than literally the symbol we picked, to be honest. We both went pacifist at this point. So yeah, I mean, fairly linear, other than that ending with what you do. There is a cool moment I believe you missed involving North in the Cyberlife store where, before your speech, she's looking at a certain AI, and it's one that looks exactly like herself. And I think she just has a bit of an existential crisis moment where she sort of sees she's a duplicate, she's not unique or something. I can't remember the exact gist of it, but it was just a cool little bit of depth to give to North there. But yeah, brilliant. We're at the halfway point. We move back to, well, I guess Hank, actually.
Yeah.
So as we record the last episode, Jack sacrificed himself with Connor to save Hank in the Stratford Tower. And I recall you saw Connor straight away as Hank drove up to Kamski's house, and you were like, what? And yeah, that's the plot twist. Connor has the ultimate plot armor. He constantly gets reinstalled by Cyberlife, and although he can die basically at every turn, whether he gets shot by Hank on the bridge, whether he dies somehow, whether he's chasing Rupert, whether he gets hit by a car on the motorway, Connor can die a lot, most in the game. I think there is a trophy that I managed to get where you have to kill him off 8 times, but he still, goes for the whole game. So yeah, I mean, Jack, just talk us through your reaction, because I had to lie pretty heavily throughout the whole game, to be honest, mate.
Yeah, you know what? It's like it did get me. There was a couple of questions I had on mind, like I told you before. One being, they are robots. I was thinking, what's wrong with them just like reinstalling a certain memory thing or whatever? But then the fact, like literally before I started playing, I was like, oh, so we're gonna have less chapters to play, and use like, oh no, the maths works out, and I was thinking that's a bit sus.
Yeah.
But I'll play it anyway. Oh, so we're gonna have less chapters to play, and use like, oh no, the maths works out, and I was thinking that's a bit sus.
Yeah.
But I'll play it anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
So of course, yeah, obviously Connor's alive and Hank's surprised. I mean, he's surprised like myself, kinda. And but you're going to what's his name? Is it Kamski?
Kamski.
Kamski's house. Your lord and creator as an android, and we meet Chloe, of course, who welcomes us into the house. And you have like a moment where you're waiting, and you can go around and analyze bits and pieces. I suppose the main crux of this is him giving you somewhat of a philosophical, maybe moral lecture on what Connor sees himself as, whether he has any empathy or not. And in my instance, I was trying to stay very neutral. I didn't want to lean necessarily one way or the other. I thought I could try and get away from it. And then he sort of puts a gun in your hand and asks Chloe to kneel in front of him. And he just asks the question, look, does the investigation matter to you more, or is it about sort of showing empathy in the life of an android? Because he also says as well, or is it just a piece of plastic? And because I was quite a pacifist in the previous chapter, I sort of was conscious I didn't want to have this boring gameplay where I just wasn't acting. I want to throw these curveballs in there every now and then. I think as well that Connor would do what he did, so I shot Chloe in the head thinking, you know what, let's get some more information out of him. It might be again like a sacrificial lamb thing where the information he reveals could like really go, you know, as far as the end game. It might be useful. Turns out it didn't really. I did ask him about like RA9, and he was like, I don't really know. He could be a messiah, he could be this, he could be that. And I was thinking, mate, thanks for fucking help, because that's all I was thinking anyway. So I don't know, I guess I sort of regret it, because Hank got quite pissy with me, and he stormed off and then got in his car and drove off. But hey ho, you live with your decisions, and it was an okay scene, I guess.
Yeah, really cool, because Kamski's mentioned a little bit throughout, especially if you read the magazines, and there's the section where Connor scans Marcus's face in the Stratford Tower, and it says, a gift from Elijah Kamski to Carl Manfred. So there's a few scenes where this Kamski guy does come up, and it's cool to finally meet him. Again, I'm a sucker for commenting on the location and setting. I love the setting here. It's like a mansion, and we've had mansions before, but very traditional big ones such as Carl's and Zlatko's. Here we've got a very modern one where everything's kind of like black and white, apart from like the colour of the pool, which is red.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just really unique. Like you just see Kamski swimming in this like pool of red, like almost like blood. And it's just really unique and eye-catching. You know, you can put your literature cap on and analyse a little bit of that as well. You know, it's really interesting to see. But yeah, obviously, it's really... One detail I liked as well here is when he's doing the Kamski test and he gives you the gun, there's Connor's LED light is flickering yellow, and you can see that Kamskin's questions, because he's the creator, he almost has like, you know, an upper hand on Hank and Connor here. Although you've come into his house and you're doing the interrogating, he's just kind of calling the shots almost, and he's posing these philosophical dilemmas, and it almost is like Connor is struggling and he is trying to break that machine nature out of him. And you know, it flickers yellow, and obviously for yourself you chose to shoot the Chloe. It's dead interesting where Kamski's there like, okay, yep, test success, you have no empathy, kind of thing. And yeah, really interesting to see what it does to the relationship of Connor and Hank. It's almost as if Hank wants you to be more humane than you are. He hates the inhumanity and just the machine nature of yourself. And yeah, he just was really upset with you killing Chloe, which is interesting considering how hostile he was towards androids at the start of the game. So yeah, that one's just like really super interesting, I found. For my playthrough, I did decide to spare. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I can, you know, bring myself to like maybe shoot the lady in the menu. I don't know. Maybe maybe I just it was kind of like Hank versus Kamski, and I know for the investigation it's best to go with Kamski. But yeah, I don't know. I just decided to side with Hank here. So I spared Chloe and didn't come away with any information. Obviously, if you do shoot Chloe, you have to. He only gives you one question, doesn't he? Which is a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I could sense your frustration when that happened. You were like, "Oh, just the one." You told me I'd get to know everything.
Yeah. No, it's so true. He said, "I'll tell you all you need to know," and he offers one question. So I was a bit like, "Oh, well, I wish maybe I went the other way now." But yeah, like I don't know. Like, in that decision as well, I was thinking about the whole Zen Garden stuff. The mission's the most important thing. You got to get it right. You got to get it done, and all this jazz. So. Yeah, that's the decision I made, and obviously you then leave and go outside, and Hank's pretty pissed off at you. So,
one more thing, Kamski's last words to you are, "I always leave an emergency exit in my programs." Did you make anything of that?
yeah, it was a line that I don't know. I find it quite confusing. To me, it sounds like it's almost like a suicide code or something like that. If anything gets too much, you can just flick the switch or something. I don't know if it's something to do with that. Emergency exit. Is it something to do with becoming a deviant? Because when you are showing deviant traits, it's almost like something's coming out of you and you're bashing this wall to break free. So like it could be to do with that. I really don't know.
It's very valid, the whole deviant comment, especially as he constantly mentions, "Oh, a war's coming, a war was inevitable, an uprising was always going to happen." And it's almost as if like Kamski's kind of created this little war, as if he knew, maybe kind of programmed, androids to have almost like a secret deviant setting if they're pushed that way. So yeah, super interesting. Maybe Kamski's just the absolute mastermind, of the whole thing. So we conclude the chapter with Marcus. Before we get to the Freedom March, we have a little kind of interaction with him and North, where you're chilling on the roof, and it's just a little bit of more backstory. Like you mentioned, I do agree. Simon Josh very one-dimensional. Simon's kind of the leader you barge out the way, who can be killed off at every opportunity, so I don't think Simon's really supposed to be in the game. Josh is just the pacifist to kind of counter out, North's kind of radicalism, I guess. But yeah, you talk about each other's pasts, where you sort of reminisce about Carl, how you cared for him. North tells you a little bit of backstory about how she used to be a sex android at the Eden Club. So yeah, just tell her, did you expect this? What did you make of this scene?
I mean, no, I didn't expect that in terms of her backstory, but I think when she started saying, "Oh yeah, this man rented me," of course I thought back to the Eden Club, and there was a guy that was found dead through strangulation, and then she said, "I strangled him," and I was thinking, wait, was she the one that Connor was following earlier, but she hasn't got blue hair? But then I was thinking as well that Kara could change her hair on a whim in a previous chapter when she was by the car, so I was thinking it could well be North. But and she does mention the Eden Club as well, so I was like, is that literally her, or is it just some sort of weird coincidence?
It's super interesting, and it does explain why the first time you interacted with her, you were like, "Oh, what did you do before this?" And she was like, "It's none of your business," and you were like, "Oh, all right."
Yeah.
So it does explain a little bit about why North is kind of a cold android, I guess, which is cool. Fun fact though, obviously having played the game, knowing who North is, and then rewatching it again, there's a few things I noticed. For example, there are a few breadcrumbs to say she does come from the Eden Club. One of them being that, simply in the Eden Club, I think there's one or two of the models in the domes that you can rent out look exactly like North.
Oh, okay.
And another interesting one as well was when you're Connor and you're at the police station and you're looking through deviant case files. The fourth one is North, essentially, and it says, "Oh yeah, this deviant escaped from the Eden Club after strangling someone." So it's almost like you can find out about North before you even know she's going to become a character in the game. And I just like little Easter eggs like that. I just think they're really interesting. But anyway, happy to go over to the Freedom March?
Yeah, absolutely. So this really becomes the point, and you know what? In that scene as well, it made me start to question not Marcus a little bit, but the position that he was starting to find himself in, because he said a line where he was like, they all just follow me, they obey everything I say. And it made me think about free will again, like, 'cause that's ultimately his mission, right? It's to free them so they can have minds of their own. Of course, they're just obeying his every command. There's an argument to say, I won't go into it too much, but it could almost merge into a dictatorship. And I think he says that the power feels good, and it could be an incredible irony that he goes completely the opposite way from what he actually intended to go through. Like, rather than be this sort of more liberal nature, it can actually spell into a dictatorship, like I said. So it was really interesting stuff on like a thematic level.
It's really interesting you mention that, because obviously that is a very common theme in history, where someone does want to be, a person of the people and rise up and be that fair person. But it's almost like the power and the greed can be addicting, and we've seen numerous, historical figures fall into that. So yeah, could Marcus be the next one?
Yeah, and obviously the next scene, it sort of helps that argument in many ways, because it was really cool though. You're literally walking down the street, and I don't know if he's like somehow his special ability has got stronger or whatever, but he doesn't even touch them anymore. He can just point at them and connect with them, and he's slowly amassing. You have like the number ticking on the screen to show like how many androids have like joined the march. And you're just walking down this street, and you can even do other things like look at the screens on the skyscrapers and the buildings, and you can change it to like match the symbol of Jericho. And I don't know, it was just really epic, especially with like the music in the background. And it comes to this sort of standoff with police, because there is that one police officer that sort of manages to call them in, I guess. SWAT teams arrive, and you have this dilemma, don't you, where you can either stand off, you can attack, and of course that you've got like Josh and North at the side of you again. Maybe we should be a pacifist, maybe we should attack. Interestingly, because Simon's still there in my playthrough, he also said attack, if I remember rightly as well. Like for a couple of seconds I didn't know what to do, because it's been a very pacifist heavy chapter with like a little sprinkling of going aggressive with Connor. But I don't know, there's some moments where like I don't want to do the moral thing, because it's a video game after all. I want to have fun with it. I don't want to just constantly stand off and be like, no, spare everyone sort of thing. So I yelled at the TV, didn't I? I said attack, and they all start running towards the cops. Like this epic fight scene happens where you've got androids getting shot, and you're playing as Marcus. And the QTEs are tough here. Like, obviously there's a transition for me going from Xbox to PlayStation, but because of all the colours and all of the fast movements and things going on, I was sometimes struggling to see the QTEs come up. So again, it raised the bar for me. It was quite tense. Thankfully I come out unscathed, and I think my fellow members of Jericho came out unscathed as well. But of course it set the tone now, like Kamski said, that there's going to be a war, and I think the public opinion bar dropped down again for me. So yeah, I don't know, in comparison to you, mate, like what your playthrough was, or just your general thoughts on that whole march scene.
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting thing for me here, and I might be remembering this wrong, so please correct me as always, guys, but obviously if we look at Simon in my chapter, I think I forgot to mention it in the last episode, but Simon got shot and was left on Stratford Tower. But when I was Connor, I went straight in the break room with the three androids with the Deviant in there, and that ends the chapter pretty much. So I never went on the roof or found Simon, who would have been up there. So Simon was never died up there either, and I'm pretty sure he came back. And I think I can remember a scene where North hugs him, like, Simon, you're back. So Simon can actually come back into the group,
right?
As he did for me, which is really cool. It just shows you like the amount of branches. I could be remembering that wrong, but I'm pretty sure I had Simon in my playthrough. Yeah, so I love the bit where you're converting people. It's really funny as well, where you sort of see all this people standing by losing their personal assistants. It's like, Greg, come back here. You can intervene at one point with one of them to, this is break it up, which is really funny. But yeah, you're converting more people. It's really interesting to see there's another Kara one out there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, yeah.
But yeah, so when I got to the ultimate bits at the end with the decisions, you can either, attack, leave, or stand ground. And maybe it's the wishy-washy thing right in between, but I chose to stand my ground. So I can't remember exactly what happens, but I believe the cops do, just get really impatient, and I think someone has to die here. It's usually Simon again. Like I say, Simon can just die at every point now because he's no longer needed in the story. But I actually had John came back. Now, John is the person from the cyber warehouse who I, let into Jericho. So that's just a little cool thing. If you recruit John sacrifices himself here. So John died for me. So that scene at the end where Marcus is looking all kind of sad, it has someone dying in his arms. I think for me it was John at that point. So yeah, that bit can kind of change. Obviously I never got some cool fight scene, but I did have that, I guess. It was really interesting to see the fight scene. Like you say, it's so tense. I love these Quantic Dream fights, because even someone like myself who's an experienced PlayStation gamer, even I find them quite challenging at the best of times. And for yourself, I think maybe you passed a decent, 70% of them. So there was a moment in there where I think you failed 2 back to back, and it was, oh my god. And then there were times, especially in the cinematic bit, where it looked like Marcus could have died, because there's bits where he's getting circled by 3 people. There's bits where he's getting beaten and he's literally on the floor. I think North bails you out a couple of times, as always. North, is such a solid figure, a good fighter there. It did look like maybe you were a few QTEs away from maybe having a tragic ending there, especially as Marcus can die in this scene, I'm pretty sure. And also because your North and your Marcus were kind of pretty covered in blue blood. They, spat a bit of blood out at points. I think you took a baseball bat or a bat onto the face, and I know Marcus spat blood, and, they did look a bit worse for wear, but they came out on top. It's interesting you chose to attack, and obviously I do agree with it, and it is really interesting to see, but obviously doing the pacifist option in the previous chapter and then going for the aggressive one. But then there's still a bit of pacifist nature in you when the last 5 guards are fleeing and you chose to spare them. And I think you spared another guard midway through, didn't you?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, yeah.
It's interesting, and then you've got this whole, more news broadcasts where they're like, yep, terrorists, we're at war. And I think this is a really good thing that Quantic Dream do, where that is what the media do. Any slight sort of form of aggression, or just kind of any kind of drama, and boom, they put labels out like terrorism. And then the media and the public kind of really have that fear, don't they, where they believe they can't trust their own machines. So dead interesting, and that's where the chapter ended. I think he went back to the pause menu to check on Chloe to see if she had a bullet hole in her forehead. She didn't. she's still alive and well.
Still intact, yeah.
Still intact. So that was a different Chloe. But super interesting, Jack. Penultimate chapter. Tell us a little bit about your expectations going forward, what you're thinking of the game so far, and maybe tell us a little bit about like the plot armor, what you think the plot armors mean now that that Connor can't die.
Yeah, now that I know Connor can't die, it's sort of gone down in my estimations, to be honest. Like, it's cool that that he can have death scenes. Is it a bit of a fake out? Sure. Is it a great way to work your way around plot armor? Of course it is. And of course, I feel like, as you say, like, Marcus could die in this scene, but I feel like Marcus has plot armor as well up to this point, because all of his scenes seem like fairly linear, and of course, like, it seems that the main story within this game is his one with the whole uprising of Jericho and etc. etc. It seems like Kara's the only one. I feel like if Kara could die, and then you're playing as Connor and Marcus, I don't know. Like, it would make me feel like that the choices aren't as important as it would let on. But then another reason that it's not all about them living or dying. It might be just seeing different types of scenes. It really depends how you look at it. But overall, a fantastic game. I'm sure I'll go into it more when we cover the final chapter. And like in terms of the plot, I'm still pretty much in the dark as to what to expect in these final few chapters, mate.
Yeah, of course. It could be like a Fahrenheit where the game's brilliant and then it kind of ends on a bombshell. Maybe I don't quite know the public kind of the general consensus of how the game ends, but yeah. In terms of the plot armor, it's one of those ones where I think Kara can die as early as Todd. I think Todd can kill Kara, so Kara can die super early. Yeah, I believe it's Marcus and Connor that get towards the end, and from. It's a difficult one. What makes the perfect game? Is it one where they could die and then you can have a short game if they die, but that's just on you for killing them? Or is it one of those ones where maybe you do have to kind of dress it up a little bit? And it's just such an interesting one, and I wonder how they could have done it better, or I wonder if there's no way around it. Maybe you need a fourth character in there. It's quite tricky, isn't it?
Potentially a future debate episode.
Yeah, of course.
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because you could do it for supermassive games, but also this one. So yeah, we have to keep that in mind.
I think even for Heavy Rain, I think all 4 characters have plot armor, and I think Scott has to make it to the end, but I think the other 3 have to be alive till at least their final 1 or 2 chapters. So it's really interesting, and I'm wondering, how do you make a perfect Quantic Dream game? I completely agree. I'd love to do a future video on this, on how to get around this, but brilliant. Everything good? We happy to conclude there?
Yeah, mate, let's wrap it up.
Fantastic. Well, thank you as always for joining, guys. That was the penultimate episode of our Detroit Become Human deep dive analysis. Join us next week for the 8th and final part, where we'll see how Jack's chapter ends. We'll see you in the next one, guys.
See you next time.